This 1970s Hohner Jazz Bass is in some real bad shape. One of the tuning machines is being held together with packing tape. There are important screws missing all over the place. There is no output from one of the pickups, and the other is intermittent and noisy. The owner has at some point painted the fretboard to give it a more Slipknot aesthetic. But most problematic of all is the severely bowed neck, which has resulted in a string action so high that I can almost fit my hand between strings and fretboard. So we're going to strip this down and discover if it can even be fixed. Beneath the pickups and their polystyrene risers lay an unexpected time capsule of previous maintenance. A folded up KP Peanuts packet with the best before date of December 1988. If I'm the first person to work on this instrument in nearly 35 years, then that might go some way to explaining the condition it is in. Moving on to the neck, I began cleanup by taking steel wool to the fretboard. The custom paintwork is protected by a poorly applied layer of varnish which is all over the frets. The steel wool will make short work of smoothing this all out. My goal is to preserve all the customization and simply make this bass function comfortably. So if you were expecting me to remove the stickers and restore everything to factory condition, then this video might leave you with some restoration blue balls. A little touch of wax-based fretboard conditioner brings back the sheen on a much smoother neck. Eyeballing the neck, sans string tension still shows a bit of a bow. And it's also clear how uneven the frets are. The truss rod is moving but doesn't appear to be correcting the issue. So I'm implementing some body leverage to force the neck into a back bow, giving more adjustment room for the truss rod. Checking progress with the level bar shows that I am straightening the neck, at least in part. This portion of the neck is now flat, but it seems to lift up at the very end where the truss rod has no influence. But it may just be that the frets here are much taller than the very worn frets further down the neck. Assuming the truss rod can hold the neck straight under string tension, I should be able to compensate by levelling the frets at the high end considerably more than those on the rest of the neck and have it play properly. The frets are all in desperate need of maintenance, so getting them all near level, crowned and polished is necessary for this instrument. Moving on to dismantling the hardware, I find myself very impressed with the quality of the bridge. It has a heavy milled steel base plate and chunky chrome-plated brass saddles in a design I don't think I've seen before. The strings mount in these keyhole cutouts in the base plate, giving the down pressure of a string-through construction without punching holes all the way through the instrument. Unfortunately, one of the height adjustment grub screws was broken and rusted into position. No amount of WD-40 or percussive maintenance could make it budge, so I ended up drilling it out before mangling the remains of the screw beyond recognition. All the metal parts then went for a swim in a white vinegar bath. Vinegar is a weak acid which will help soften dirt, rust and corrosion from the metal parts without having any detrimental impact over the underlying metal or chrome plating. These were left to soak for about an hour with occasional gentle agitation, then scrubbed up with an old toothbrush. You can really see how much filth is coming off here. After rinsing off the parts with dish soap and water to neutralise the acid, they were sprayed down with WD-40, which will drive out any remaining moisture and liquefy any remaining softened rust. I could then put everything back together, stealing a gear screw from a modern donor tuner to replace the lost one. Investigating the pickups revealed one reading at 6.8 kiloohms and the other reading as an open circuit. Hoping it was simply a damaged signal wire and not a dead coil, I broke it open to investigate further, and sure enough, it was a completely dead coil. I even found the part of the coil that had broken, and there is only one thing to do under these circumstances: cut off the whole coil and rewind it. Spinning up the bobbin on the winder, I wrapped about 5,500 turns of 42 gauge copper, bringing it close to the original output, and finally dipping the completed coil in liquid wax. This process allows all of the airspace in the coil to be replaced with wax, and once it solidifies, the whole coil will be consolidated into a single mass, which helps prevent microphonic effects. These electronics are nasty, corroded garbage which aren't worth saving, so I've pulled equivalent parts from my spares drawer, and I'll recreate the exact wiring before chucking the old loom into the bin. Despite making a monumental improvement to the condition of this bass guitar, it's still far from perfect. as the lack of decent playing in the sound examples probably demonstrated. That freshly wound pickup sounds pretty good, but despite the coil's dip in the wax, this pickup as a whole is still microphonic.
This pickup is microphonic. Sweaty cunt flaps.
That's probably a result of the magnet and base plate not being permanently affixed to the structure. If the magnet is moving around independently of the coil, then that will also generate microphonic effects, so I'll have to go back inside here and hot glue the whole structure together. A far more critical issue is the neck. The truss rod simply isn't holding the neck straight once string tension is reapplied, pulling the neck into quite a wicked bow. It's nowhere near as bad a bow as it was initially. I've managed to straighten it out to some degree. I can no longer get my hand between the strings and fretboard, for example, but it still renders everything above the 12th fret unplayable. The fretboard stays flat above the 12th fret, but starts to arc the further down we get. This means the higher we're playing on the board, the more chance there is of notes fretting out. If the neck could be convinced to stay straight, then we could completely alleviate this issue, but the truss rod is already as tight as it's willing to go. There's every chance that the truss rod simply isn't functioning well anymore, it's fucked, and there's not much we can do about it. Where does this leave us then? Well, we could just cut our losses and say this bass only plays cleanly below the 9th fret, and call it a day. If we're recording rock bass, then below the 9th fret is probably all we need anyway, but that would be quite a defeatist attitude. We could say let's replace the neck and just get rid of the issue, but for one, a replacement neck is going to cost more than this entire instrument is worth, and two, for a 1970s possibly Korean-made bass guitar, the chances of a modern Fender-sized replacement neck fitting this without considerable modification are next to zero. So it might not be the simple solution it seems like. Of course, we could always remove a couple of frets, drill some holes, pop in some steaming elements, use heat and water vapor to break the glue bond between the fretboard and neck, carefully separate the fretboard, replace the truss rod, put in some carbon fibre reinforcements to strengthen the lower end of the neck, carefully glue the fretboard back on, and then refinish the whole thing. But I think it should be obvious why I'm not even going to entertain that idea. Which leaves me with only one option, which has worked for me before in the past but has no guarantee of success. And that is to take the neck off and clamp it into an aggressive back bow. Tighten up the truss rod in that arrangement and then leave it in clamps for several days in the hope that the wood will adopt that new shape. That should hopefully give us enough back bow that when the strings go back on, it'll pull the neck straight, and if the truss rod is still working, give us enough adjustment to push the neck into relief if necessary. Sometimes when restoring instruments, the fixes aren't simple, which is a shame because I really do like this bass guitar. It's got a lot of character to the way it plays and to the chunky, clanky nature of the sounds. I think it would add a lot of raunchy energy to any tracks recorded with it, so I'd very much like to see it fully operational. But at this time, that's a project for another day. And if you do want to see this project continue, then you should consider supporting me on Patreon. Your financial contribution helps make videos like this possible and lessens my reliance on sponsors and ads to keep working on exciting rubbish instruments. Don't forget to click all the buttons you're supposed to make this video viable to the ever-changing whims of the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now. Keep it loud and stay safe. Oh, and I fixed that rattling tuning machine with just a little touch of super glue.